Okay. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm your host, Eureka, and today it's my honor to welcome Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He's not only a doctor of organizational psychology, but also is the best-selling author of Willpower Doesn't Work. I actually came across Ben reading a bunch of his articles on Medium, and I've been following him for quite a while. And he's been featured on Forbes, Fortune, Fast Company, Business Insider, Huffington Post, and so many more magazines and blogs and forums. So interesting fact, he and his wife adopted 3 kids from the foster system. And a month later, Lauren became pregnant with twins and gave birth to 2 daughters. And all of this happened in a year, in 2018. So he has 5 children, and you must be super busy. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Very happy to be with you. It's a lot of fun, and we are quite busy, but we also keep things pretty simple. So
yeah, so I wanted to touch on your book because I love your new book, Personality Isn't Permanent, and especially how you talk about breaking through your limiting beliefs and shifting the narrative of your story. And as today's theme is about self-love, confidence, worth, I want to specifically ask you about breaking through our limiting beliefs and how to build genuine confidence. I know that's such a huge topic, so I do have more specific questions.
Do you want me to answer that, or do you want to wait for your specific questions?
Oh, I mean, you can go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. You keep going.
Okay. So in your book, you talk about how our limiting beliefs, like basically like how we define ourselves, what we can't do, what we think we're good at, it prevents us from actually believing in ourselves. And a lot of that is based on a past trauma that we haven't reframed. So in other words, we make a meaning about ourselves based on some event that's happened. Can you speak about that, like what the process is, like what happens, why do we do this, and maybe give us an example?
Totally. Happily. Yeah, so trauma is one of the big things that obviously shapes our personality. This is former experiences that we gave a lot of meaning to. I actually really got a deep dive into this by reading the book, Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. That's like the #1 book on trauma right now. So good. Highly recommended. But one of the things that Bessel talks about in that book, and actually that book is the reason I wrote this book. So anyways, one quick second. So basically, one of the things that Bessel talks about in that book is that trauma freezes your personality, and it keeps you stuck in the past. It leads you to being defined by the past, and it leads you to ultimately being emotionally rigid. Like you become unwilling to handle emotions. In many ways, you build a wall around your comfort zone. And personality and comfort zone are very similar concepts. Like your personality and your comfort zone are kind of the same thing. Like to do anything outside your comfort zone means it's outside of what you're typically used to doing. And so I'll just give a quick example because I think this will be the easiest way to explain it. I have a distant relative, and she's, you know this story, right?
Yep.
It's an interesting story,
yeah.
But I think it really explains the point, is that she's now in her 80s, totally amazing woman. And back when she was in college, she was super well educated, went to Stanford, went to Cornell, brilliant writer. And she always wanted to write children's books. And basically what happened was when she was in her 40s, and this must have been like 40 years ago, she took a private art lesson. And in that art lesson, the teacher corrected her, like in front of everyone. There's maybe 5 or 6 extra students, but the teacher was correcting her, like her work in front of everyone. And this relative of mine was super embarrassed that she was getting corrected in public, and just thought like it wasn't fair that he was, doing it publicly, but also she was thinking like he wasn't correcting anyone else. And so basically the idea that came into her head, because it was hurting so much embarrassing wise, she basically had the idea that popped into her head that I'm not very good at drawing. Like I can't do this. And so she never went back, never kept studying drawing. I meet her 40 years later, and I learned that she's always wanted to do these kids' books. And I'm like, well, why haven't you done it? Where are all your books? And she said, well, I'm not good at drawing. And that belief came from an experience, and it came from the meaning that she gave to an experience. And it's really important to realize that our former selves have given meaning to various experiences that are now shaping how we see ourselves. Like when I was 11 years old, my parents got divorced. My father became a drug addict. And like, of course, the 11-year-old version of me was making meaning. I was interpreting my experiences. I was creating an identity. But the 32-year-old version of me doesn't need to create those same meanings. I can look back and I can say, you know, there's different things now that I'm aware of that I wasn't aware of back then. And I can choose the meanings of my past. And I also get to choose the meanings that I create now. And that really shapes how we see the world. And so trauma is an event that happened that you didn't change the meaning of. You're still defined by the initial meaning that you gave it.
Mm-hmm. And then how would somebody go about reframing that trauma and changing that meaning about ourselves?
Yeah. Well, so the meaning is connected to emotions, so it was obviously negative. It hurt a lot. And you probably you don't want to go back and handle it. And so I think that the two most effective ways to deal with it are, one, journaling about your former experiences, and actually just thinking about it. So there's three quotes I'll share. There are three quotes I really love. One is, all progress starts by telling the truth. That's Dan Sullivan. So I think just getting better at telling people what you're going through. Actually, that's what Mr. Rogers said. There's another quote he said, anything that is human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can become more manageable. He says, when we talk about our feelings, they stop being so scary. They stop being so hard to handle. And so I think being willing to talk to people about what you went through and getting alternative perspectives. I also think it's super important to realize that who you are today is different from who you were in the past, and that your former self deserves a lot of empathy, and to give them the benefit of the doubt. But you also recognize you're not that same person anymore. You would do things differently. You see things differently, and you don't have to be that same person. And so I think it's nice to just not distance yourself to some degree, but like, you don't have to be that same person. You don't have to see yourself the same way. And so you can choose different meanings based on who you are today. And ultimately, from my perspective, you want to choose meanings that are supportive of your future. So like, you want to view the past as something that happened for you, not to you. You want to use it as information and experience that allows you to make better choices in the future, versus, oh, this happened to me and now I'm stuck. Like, you don't want to view it that way. You want to find a better way of looking at it so that you can use it to support your better future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wanted to touch a little bit upon, like, so many people, and I'm totally guilty of this too, is like, we hold on to that narrative of the past because it becomes like part of our identity, right? So like, are there other reasons why we keep holding on to this narrative that doesn't serve us?
Yeah, because I think it allows you to justify who you are right now. It doesn't require that you do anything about it. Yeah, identity is very, very important. In my opinion, identity is enormously more important than personality. And identity is actually the thing that drives personality. And so your identity is your story. It's the story you tell about yourself. It's the way you explain yourself. It's the way you explain, you yourself and describe yourself. And usually it's very common that people's stories are based on former traumas, and that this is why I am the way I am.
Yeah.
And from my experience, it's actually more powerful to redirect your identity towards the person you want to become, your future self. Obviously, what that requires is that you no longer are justified in your behavior because your future self is someone different than you. And in order for you to become that person, you have to kind of grow into it. And that would put you in a vulnerable position where you're maybe going to make mistakes along the way. And you've got to be comfortable not being perfect. Whereas maybe with your former story, it really fits with who you are today. And so you're not required to do anything about it. You just can say, this is who I am. This is why I am the way I am. And there's no reason to change. And so you can actually defend the story. You can defend your labels. You can defend your identity rather than saying, this isn't exactly this. Who I am today doesn't really matter that much. What matters is the person I'm striving for. And I'm not quite there yet. And I'll make a lot of mistakes and I need some serious help, but this is where I'm going. And from an addiction standpoint, like, that type of mindset would be very effective at moving forward. Defending your current behaviors, like, that's probably going to stunt your growth.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I just wanted to share a quick story. I had a similar
Please do.
Similar story to your relative. Was kind of similar in that I was in an English class, and the essay that I had written was the example of all the wrong things to do in an essay, and it was like shared with everybody in the class. And I was like so mortified, and what I made from that experience was, I'm not a good writer. And it wasn't until I actually started to, when I became a life coach and I started blogging and, writing emails to my list, is like when I really forced myself to write. And actually a lot of the feedback that I received was like, wow, this is so helpful. And now I'm also publishing on like Medium as well, and Tiny Buddha and different platforms. And this one sentence that you wrote in your book, like, confidence takes courage. I love that line. I actually like wrote it in my journal because I'm like, yeah, in order for me to break through or reframe and change that past narrative, is I have to take an uncomfortable action towards, like your higher version, like who I want to be, my higher vision of myself. Like you said, like 10 years from now, that's your hero, right? Like, what is the ideal version of yourself 10 years from now? And like that would be like a successful blogger, successful coach. And that means that I have to be able to write that means I have to be a good writer. But in the back of my mind, I still have that story of like, no, you're not a good writer. And I'm like, you know what? Shut up. Like, I'm going to write anyways, right? And to really take action towards that.
Yeah, I am in love with your story and I'm in love with your courage. And it always takes courage. It always takes face the past and to choose to view it from a different way and to maybe change the meaning and to say, I'm going to let that story go. It takes huge courage to pursue a future self. It doesn't take very much courage to just say, this is who I am.
Yeah.
That really limits your future though, because basically what you're saying is this is me and this is who I'm going to be in the future. And obviously that's not a very creative transformational mindset. So yeah, to pursue a future self, courage is always the doorway to building confidence. And as you build confidence, you obviously have way more opportunity because confidence allows you to believe in yourself and buy things that might not work. And so, yeah, I mean, courage is the doorway. And that's why I actually talk a lot in the book about psychological flexibility, because when you're acting courageously and you're trying stuff that might fail, you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of emotions. You may be failing on your failing. And you need to learn how to handle the emotions of all that because it can be an emotional journey. And it's kind of a redefinition of what happiness is, because happiness doesn't mean actually that everything feels good. Sometimes it actually, you feel a lot of anxiety, or sometimes it's just horrible because you just really failed. I mean, to be honest with you, with Willpower Doesn't Work, which is the book I came out with in 2018, I spent a lot of money and so much time trying to launch that book a certain way, and none of it really worked. It actually totally all fell apart. And I went through probably about a 3 or 4 month depression, and it took me about 3 or 4 months to emotionally recover. In psychology, we call that a refractory period, where it's like, how long does it take to emotionally recover from an event? The shorter you can make that gap, where it's like you just quickly recover, you just be graceful about your failures, and you don't be defined by your failures, but you're like, okay. And that's really what a growth mindset is. Someone with a growth mindset, if they fail or if something doesn't work out, they're not defined by the present. Instead, they just say, not yet. I'm not defined by this. I'm interested in what's not yet. And that's what Carol Dweck says. She says people with a growth mindset say not yet. Whereas people with a fixed mindset, they say this, they focus on what's now. And right now we shouldn't be defined by who we are right now.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. I want to switch topics on confidence, because I know this is something that, people struggle with so much. And you talk a lot about confidence in your book. And so my question to you is, like, how do we genuinely build confidence?
So confidence, courage is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Confidence is basically self-trust. It's the belief that you have in your own self. And so you can do it in kind of two ways. One is small wins, but basically confidence comes from making progress towards where you want to go. It's built by watching yourself succeed. It's built by even in small ways. Like if you say, I'm going to get up at 6:00 and I'm going to go for a run. If you do that and you follow through, then you're like, okay, I believe myself more, And so you want to believe yourself when it comes to like doing bigger and bigger things. And so confidence is built by intentional movement towards your goals or courageous movement towards your goals, like small steps forward on a daily basis. You're just moving in the direction you want to go and watching yourself follow through and making progress, or courageous actions towards your goals. But the more you move forward in the direction you want to go, the more confident you'll become. And confidence just is essential. It's something that you build. So like, just as an example, as a writer, you're building way more confidence than you had in the past by writing to your newsletter. By actually doing it, you build confidence by doing what you want to be doing, even imperfectly. And so you're writing on these platforms, writing on Medium, and so like you build confidence as you go, and so you just have to, you build confidence by trying and learning and failing. And then you build competency, which allows you to believe more and more in yourself. And you start to get good feedback. I mean, even you mentioned the feedback you get from people who read your emails, that will boost your confidence that you can keep going, So like, you need that. You need to get those wins, and you need to see that you can do this. And Eureka, like you could be whatever type of writer you really want to be. And that's just, right now, it's just about where your confidence is and how much you're willing to try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love this this quote that you also wrote in your book. Actually, this one was from Dr. Jerome Bruner, Harvard psychologist, said, "You're more likely to act yourself into feeling than feel yourself into action." And I think, and you said confidence is the same way. You can't have it first. It must come as a byproduct of chosen of goals and consistent action. And I really love that you say that, because like as you're talking about like, even though we don't feel confident, like I don't feel like a good writer, it's like you have to take those actions, and along the way the confidence is just the byproduct of it. And the small little wins that you get, like the emails that I receive, or the comments, those definitely build confidence.
Yeah, I love that. You have to take the action first, and the confidence comes afterward. Just like motivation. Motivation is a byproduct as well. Like you take action and motivation kicks in. You take action and confidence starts to build, and you start to want it more. Even desire. You can train your desires. If you start blogging, just as an example, you'll start to want to do it more. If you start going to the gym, you'll start wanting to do it more. You can train your desire so that you can want what you actually think you want. Sometimes you have to train yourself to really want it and to really be committed to it. I had to do that. Like when we first became foster parents of the kids, I had to train myself to want to be around the kids, because initially my current preferences were like, I want to go back to school. Like, this is hard. I don't know these kids. Like, I'm not good at this. And I had to like really invest and say, this is what I want. And so I'm going to learn how to really want it. And in order to do that, you've got to like take action in that direction. And then you start to really say, yeah, this is exactly what I want.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And then another thing you talked about is like, look at your life right now. That's what you're committed to. And I know that might be a little bit difficult to kind of absorb, but it's it's kind of like one of those like harsh realities, but
it is crazy, right?
but it's so true, right? It's like your current job, how much money you make, your current body weight, like that's what you're committed to. And I think it's important to bring up, because it like I'm all for reality, like reality check. Let's take a survey of our current life. And when you put those words to it, like that is what you're committed to. It's the initial reaction is like, oh, I know that's not what I'm committed to, right? And that's kind of like our ego getting in the way, but really that is the case. And could you speak upon a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just the humbling reality. I mean, I read that in a book, actually. The book was called, I think, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, and that was a quote from that book, that like commitment is a statement of what is. It's not what you want, it's what is. And if you truly were committed to something else, you'd have something else. And that was a shocker for me, because there's so many areas of my life where I'm like, I'm not there yet. Like, I'm not where I want to be. And it made me realize, just the same as you, holy cow, like there's certain elements of my life that I've committed to that are not what I want, but I am obviously committed to it because I'm maintaining it. And so I just think what it allows you to do as a person is to admit, look, if I'm out of shape, like this is kind of where I'm committed to. And if I want to get better, I've got to really prove that commitment. And you prove your commitment through your results. You prove your commitment through what's actually happening in your life. And if you genuinely want something different, you've got to really commit to different results, different outcomes. And it does require humility to say, yeah, this is where I've currently chosen to be. But it also gives you complete responsibility and complete opportunity to choose something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that. And one of the things, this is like another quote or something I learned from a course, was that it doesn't matter, like one way to sure build your confidence is to commit to one action a day and do it. And over time, you do that every single day, you will build confidence. And that would be like my tip.
I
One
love that tip. I think that's gorgeous.
thank you, to this audience today. Like, commit to, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be something super small. It can be like, I'm going to commit to doing 5 minutes of meditation and do it. And then, whatever you choose every morning, and to really do it, and you will see your confidence grow. And so just being mindful of the time, is there one piece of like tip or advice or practice that you could give this audience of listeners in order to build their confidence?
Absolutely. And by the way, I've loved talking to you. You're very lovely, and it's super fun to chat with you.
Oh,
And
thank you so much.
for anyone who's listening, this is a cool podcast. Keep listening to this podcast. Very lovely. Yeah, I would say 2 steps. One is define your future self, and that's a drafting process. You draft it like you would draft an article. Like, you're never going to actually be fully finished, but like, who is the person you want to be in 2 or 3 years? Write about it in your journal. Really clarify the person you would like to be, the situation you would like to have. I had to at some point decide I wanted to be a professional author, and like, so you have to decide who your future self is and then start telling people about it. That takes extreme courage, but that's kind of going back to identity, and that your identity could be based on the future. And that when you hear yourself tell people about your goals, you start to believe it more. Your commitment actually increases because you're starting to watch yourself say, look, this is what I'm going to do. So there's many more steps, obviously, that I go through in the book, but those 2 are huge because commitment also comes through being intentional, and you can't be intentional without a direction. And so your future self becomes your direction. It allows you to make better decisions here and now that will impact your future self. And so if you just describe and define the person you would like to be, and that's a choice you make, not something you discover, it's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start telling people about it, and then you start to try to orient your behavior towards your future self versus your former self. Even like you said, small wins towards your future self build confidence, and giving yourself grace when you don't show up perfectly. But any small win in the direction you want to go is going to build your confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for that. For this audience, I did put a little worksheet together in
Thank
the
you.
next hour, in order to work on your future self. And because I
Cool.
do think
Beautiful.
that is like, if you're talking about like a roadmap, that is like your destination. Your destination is always changing, but you have to have a general destination of where you're going. So I do think it's super important. And, I do believe in everything that you said, Ben. I love, love, love your book. It is called Personality Isn't Permanent, and it is launching in June 16th, right? So for everyone, keep an eye out for that. Definitely recommend it. Again, thank you so much, Ben, for being with us today, and really, really appreciate your time.
You're lovely. It was such a pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you.